Hey guys, Tyler here. I just wanted to share a couple of announcements with you before we get started tonight. First of all, you've heard us say it the past couple weeks, but this is Pastor Jeremy's last Wednesday here. So he's going to be doing the sermon tonight. I figured it would be great for him to just get like the last word of sorts. So make sure you continue on this video and listen to what Pastor Jeremy has to say, and I'm sure we're going to take something great away from it. He will be back to visit, don't worry. I know those of you who, you want to see him and you want to say goodbye to him, you absolutely will be able to do that sometime in the future this summer. Another announcement, as we've said, we are meeting back together in this building, in this room, June 3rd. When? June 3rd. When? June 3rd. June 3rd, right back here, same time, 7 o'clock as normal time. We're going to meet together. We're going to do things the safe way. We're going to do them the right way, but we're going to do them the fun way. We're going to have loud music. We're going to have live preaching. We're going to have games, and it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see you. I hope you guys can't wait to come back together and see one another, and we're just going to have a great time and kind of rebuilding what we had before. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. And lastly, another announcement that is concerning this summer. I'm not sure if you've paid attention to their website or if you've heard it from somebody else, but Engage Camp has canceled their camp, their week-long summer camp for this summer. So that would have taken place July 6th through the 10th. So with that being said, we are in the process of figuring out something to take the place of that. I'm thinking something of a day camp, something that we can meet together every day for a week long and just have fun together, do activities together, outside games and sports and bonfires and all sorts of stuff. I'm working on that currently, and I will let you guys know as soon as I have a final plan in place. Obviously, it's going to be a lot cheaper than Engage Camp would be because we'd have to pay for just gas and food, essentially. So be on the lookout for that. I will give you more announcements once I have an official plan, and we are going to make this summer rocking anyway, even despite everything that's going on. We are still going to have a kicking summer. So I can't wait to see you guys. Make sure you pay attention and enjoy Pastor Jeremy's sermon.
Hey guys, I am so excited to be back with you tonight for our very last Cornerstone Online. This is a very bittersweet time for me because this will be my last time that I will get to speak to you guys. And I wish it could be in person, but this is what we have to deal with for now. But fortunately, you guys will be back next week with Tyler. Like I said, this is a very bittersweet time because Sunday is actually going to be my last day here as a pastor at Crossroads. And it's also almost 6 years to the day that I've been here at this church. And being at this church has been incredible. And I've loved every moment of it through all the highs and the lows and all the good times and some difficult times. But it has been an incredible journey and one that I'm very sad to see coming to an end. But I'm also very excited to see what God is going to have for me in the future coming up. But today I want to talk to you about something that has been very heavy on my heart lately, and that is having faith. The Bible defines faith in Hebrews 11:1 as the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. And faith is literally what it takes to become a Christian, right? If you've been coming here for more than a couple of weeks and you haven't heard me say that, then I didn't do my job over the last few years, because the only thing that makes you a Christian is to put your faith or your trust in the death and resurrection of Jesus. It's literally what makes you a Christian. But a lot of Christians seem to just stop there. But that's not good, because faith not only is what makes you a Christian, but faith is what it takes to get through the Christian life. Because a lot of you may have already realized this, but the Christian life is not easy. You're going to go through some difficult times. And it takes the same faith that it took to become a Christian in order to make it through those and to rely on God through the entire process. Because it's not just a one-time thing and you're done, right? You became a Christian, but now it's that faith that's going to carry you through the rest of it. And so today we're going to be looking at a guy named Abraham. And the Bible says in the New Testament, in Romans 4:3, it says, Abraham believed God, or he put his faith in God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. And I want to talk today about probably the ultimate expression or the ultimate test of faith that we actually see in the Bible. And that is when Abraham is asked by God to kill his only son. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. But we got to back up and look at Abraham's life leading up to that before we're able to understand how Abraham was willing to take that major, major leap of faith. So the first time that we see Abraham mentioned is in Genesis chapter 11, where it's just at the end of a genealogy, which it basically tells his family tree. But then the story really picks up in Genesis chapter 12. And in Genesis 12:1, it says, Now the Lord said to Abraham, Go from your country and your kindred, which means family, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And then he goes on to talk about the promises that he makes to him and everything. And we've dealt with that before in what's called the Abrahamic covenant, which is awesome because that's ultimately what leads to Jesus. But today we're just going to focus on the Abraham's faith as he's walking through this journey with God. Right? So God just says, I want you to leave your country and go. Right? Now, we learn later some more details about Abraham. He's about 75 years old at this point. He's married to his wife Sarah, but they don't have any children. But Abraham was a pretty successful man. He was fairly wealthy. He has lots of livestock and animals, which was what determined someone's wealth at that point in history. So Abraham was doing really good for himself. And so God says, I want you to just pack up and go. Right? So that means Abraham has to leave his family, his friends, his home, the city that he grew up in. His entire way of life is just going to be uprooted and moved somewhere else. And to make things worse, it's like, well, where am I going? Oh, don't worry about it. I'll show you when we get there. Right? That's a big step of faith, just to move everything you've known after 75 years and just go somewhere else. But we see in verse 4 where it says, Abraham went. Right? Abraham trusted God. He put his faith in God and he was able to go. Right? And that's the first step in Abraham's journey. And now to skim through many chapters, right, there's a lot of highs, but there's also some lows, right? Abraham was not perfect. He messed up a lot. Like in the same chapter as they're going through Egypt, Abraham was willing to basically give up his wife to another guy in order to save himself twice. That's not how you become husband of the year. But then we see other highs, like there's the story of Abraham and Lot, which Lot was Abraham's nephew, who was also fairly wealthy. And they get to the place where God is bringing them. And Abraham looks out and says, well, we can't really share this because we both have too many animals. So I'll let you pick whichever place you want to go, and I'll take the other one. And of course, Lot takes the nice one, and Abraham gets stuck with the one that looks like that scene from The Lion King, where the hyenas live, where everything's dry and dead. And Abraham had to trust that everything was going to work out because, right, his nephew just took the good-looking land, and he's left with the not-so-good-looking land. But then, of course, God does provide for Abraham, and Abraham has to even go rescue Lot after he is captured in somebody else's war, and all these crazy stories in that. Right, so there's another high for him. But then we come to another low when Abraham remembers that, oh yeah, God said that I was going to have a great nation, but I don't have any children. So they come up with this plan where Abraham sleeps with his wife's servant in order to have a child with her, so that way he'll have offspring in order to have like a family line. Right? And the worst part is that it was his wife's idea. Right? Does anybody see that going badly? Right? That just sounds like something out of a soap opera. Right? And obviously it does end badly because, like most women, Sarah got very jealous once she had the baby, and pushed him out. And again, just a really ugly story. But then by the time we get to chapter 17, God says to Abraham one more time, he says, I will bless Sarah, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings and people shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? But then that's exactly what happens in chapter 21. The Lord visited Sarah as he said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born with him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. Right? So through all of these ups and downs, God kept his promise, and his 90-year-old wife had a son. Now, people lived a little bit longer at this point in biblical history. However, 90 is still really old to be having a kid. So that in itself was a miracle. So that there's another huge step of faith just having a child at 90 years old. So that brings us to chapter 21. Chapter 22. So chapter 22, verse 1. Now, I could narrate the story for you, but I think the author tells it a lot better than I could. So I'm just going to read the verses through here, and I might stop at some points. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. Right, now, think about this. He just went through this whole ordeal, right? Years went by of not having children. Abraham was 100 years old when he finally got his son. This son that God promised was going to bring him a great nation. And now, God told him to kill his son and offer him as a sacrifice. Right? So there's a couple things that really stand out here if you're Abraham. First of all, God has never before, at any point, or at any point after this, asked for a human sacrifice. God has a very high value of mankind because we're made in his image. So this just seems really out of character for God to ask for a human sacrifice. Second, that's his son. Nobody wants to kill their own son. At least nobody in their right mind wants to kill their own son. And then on top of that, this is the son that he waited 100 years to have, and that was promised to make him a great nation. Because if you don't have any kids, you can't have a family lineage. You can't have a nation come after you if you don't have any kids. And this is his only son. So there's a lot riding on Isaac. And now God just asked him to go to some mountain and kill him as a sacrifice. So in verse 3, so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand fire and knife. So they went, both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, My father. And he said, Here I am, son. Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Right, so we don't know how old Isaac is at this point, but he's old enough to be carrying a bunch of wood up a mountain. And he's old enough to figure out that we're missing a very key ingredient for a sacrifice, which is literally the sacrifice is the part that we're missing, right? So he's starting to put things together, like something's not right here. But Abraham said in verse 8, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. Verse 9, when they came to a place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out with his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. Verse 11, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, for me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mountain of the Lord it shall be provided. Right, so again, just what's going on here is just so incredible. And right, you think, who would be willing to sacrifice their own son? But I think that the only reason that Abraham was able to have enough faith to trust God through the most ridiculous thing that he could ever ask him to do, to kill his own son, was because Abraham had already seen God move in so many different ways. Right? Nobody starts strong. We all start weak and we have to work up to it. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is one of the greatest bodybuilders, started off small and weak. And over time, he got bigger and stronger. Right? If you want to get really good at doing push-ups, but you can only do one today, well, do one, and then tomorrow, do two, and then three, and then four, and then five, and you can work your way up to hundreds of push-ups if you want. And our faith is the same way. We start small, and then our faith grows and grows and grows to get to that point. I think if God were to have said to Abraham on day one, I want you to kill your own child as a sacrifice, Abraham probably would have been like, no, that's crazy. I can't do that. But he started off by saying, right, I want you to trust me just to move and I'll tell you where. And Abraham said, okay, I can do that. Right? And then he had to trust him through each of these situations. Sometimes he passed, sometimes he failed miserably. But each time his faith grew up to the point of God giving him a child that he was never supposed to have. Again, he was 100 years old when Isaac was born. Right? So that in itself took a lot of watching God do this miracle, gave him the faith to be able to trust God through the most extreme circumstance of being asked to kill his own child. Now, God never intended for him to kill his own son, right? But like it said right in the beginning, right, that he was going to test him. Right? But Abraham's faith was built up to that point. Right? And that's exactly how the Christian life goes. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but again, the Christian life is pretty difficult. It doesn't get easier, but what does happen is you become stronger. And the more you watch God do in your own life, the easier it becomes to trust him with what's going to happen next. I look at my own life. It was a huge step of faith to move out here to a town that I had never been to, right? To a church that I didn't know, right? I was leaving my parents, I was leaving my friends, but it was also just me. I literally fit everything that I owned into my little two-door car, and I drove out here, and it worked out great. And there's been so many things along the way of great things that I've got to experience and things that didn't go as planned that I still learned from, and watching God provide for me in ways that only he could, that have built up my faith stronger and stronger than where it was 6 years ago. And now God is asking me to step down from this position and move on to another place that I'm still not 100% sure where I'm going, right? And that's an even bigger step of faith, because now I have a wife and 2 children that I have to take with me, right? If it were just me, I could sleep in my car. I don't care. I'll go anywhere. Like, as long as I can scrounge together enough food to get through the day, I don't need much. But now my standard of living is a little bit different now that I have a family. So it's requiring more faith now than it did when I came here to move on to the next one. But God has been building up my faith, right? And so I've learned so much, right? I'm not the same person that I was 6 years ago. And I hope you're not the same person that you were 6 years ago. And I hope 6 years from now, you're not the same person that you are today. If you haven't changed, then you failed, right? We need to constantly be growing in our faith, right? So again, this is my step of faith right now in this phase of life that God has for me, to step down here and move on to something else. And I think of Tyler, who's stepping into this position, right? This is a big step of faith. He doesn't know what he's doing, but here's the secret. None of us really know what we're doing, right? I was learning as I was going. Sometimes I learned from success. Sometimes I learned from failure. And that's okay, right? I was growing through the process, right? And so I'm going to ask you guys that you be gracious and patient with Tyler, because you're going to have to grow together. Because, again, Tyler doesn't know what he's doing yet because he hasn't done this job. Right? And so Tyler's going to be growing, and Tyler is going to see some awesome, amazing things that you guys are going to get to be a part of with him. And Tyler's also going to see some things that might be a little more difficult, and you guys need to be there to encourage him. And I swear, if I hear anybody ever says to Tyler, that's not the way Pastor Jeremy did it, I will come back here and I will smack you. You are not allowed to say that, because Tyler is not me. He's going to do things different, and that's great. That's the way it's supposed to be. He's supposed to do things Tyler's way. So you guys need to have the faith to trust Tyler in his leadership and where he's willing to take you. But again, and so if we look at your own lives, I don't know what all of you are going through right now, right? It takes a big step of faith for some of you just not being able to finish school the way that you planned, and the things that you've been going through at home. Some of you had to miss graduation and all this crazy stuff that has been brought on by this virus. Some of you are thinking about going off to college either in the fall or maybe in the next few years, right? And you're not sure where your life's going to go, right? That's a big step of faith. But think back, what has God brought you through so far, right? And each time he's going to build your faith a little bit stronger. And ultimately, what it comes down to is that we have to trust that what God has is better than what we can see. Right? We have to trust that what God has for us is better than what we can see. Abraham was willing to leave his hometown because he trusted that God must have something better than this. And the opposite of faith is fear. Fear of the unknown. Right? We're like, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if I lose all my friends? Well, what if it does work out? What if you make even better friends? What if the place that you end up is so much better than you can imagine? Right? We have to trust that God he's sovereign, which means he's in control of everything, but he also loves us and wants what's best for us. And we have to trust that what God has is better than what we have right now. And over time, right, if you're thinking, well, I don't know if I can do that, right? What if God asked me to do something that I can't do? Well, first of all, he won't. Well, let me rephrase that. God will ask you to do something that you can't do, but God will take you through it, and God will build you up to that point where you can do it. And when you do it in his strength, you can do anything, right? But it takes faith. It takes the kind of faith that Abraham had, where he was willing to, he trusted God so much that he was willing to give up his son that God had promised and miraculously gave him. That's the kind of level that Abraham had. I don't think that's the kind of level that that's not the kind of faith that he started off with, but that's the faith that God brought him to. And if you will allow God to do the same in your life, God will do amazing things through you. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and he's going to put you in situations where you've never been before, and where you're gonna be stretched in ways that you didn't think you were ever going to be. But that's the only way that we grow in our faith. Right? That's the only way that we grow as a person and as a Christian, is we have to have faith not just to become a Christian, but through our entire lives. Because every step of the Christian life requires faith. Now, will you pray with me for one last time? God, we just thank you so much for this church, for this youth group. I thank you for all of the students who are going to listen to this. And I just pray that their lives will be impacted by this story like mine has. I pray for each one of them that you will push them into a place where they feel so uncomfortable that they have to trust you and they have to rely on you. And we know that you will get them through it, and you will bring them to something better on the other side than they could have ever imagined. And I pray for myself right now as I'm going through something similar, Lord, as I'm about to take a big step of faith that feels uncomfortable and uncertain, but I know that you have something better for us. We thank you that you do care about us, that you are involved in our lives, and you have something better for us. And we thank you for Jesus that makes just even having a relationship with you possible. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.